All right, so let's move over to Q&A. So let's see, checking the chat right now to see if we had anything come in. There was a question to Arthur, Arthur Getman. Why were you not able to use Prospect Park West in your analysis of bike volumes? Arthur, you might be muted. All right. Well, maybe we don't have Arthur right now. Yeah. Any other questions from the floor? Go ahead and just unmute yourself, and you can ask.
Hi, Rob. This is Rob Kern from NYP Weill Cornell Injury Prevention. And I'm curious for Erik's presentation if NYPD, medical examiner, fire department, etc., has been influenced to adopt this identification scheme so that we can uniformly use this looking forward in data. Doing bike research data, it's been very difficult trying to identify who's an e-bicyclist, who's all that kind of stuff. So if we can get this uniform, that would be great.
Yeah, Erik, do you want to answer that, or I can actually answer that a little bit from the PD side?
Sure, Rob, why don't you take the PD side? I'll just say that Rob and I collaborate, and Rob is actually the injury prevention coordinator at our pediatric trauma center transfer hospital. One thing that we are looking at, and Rob and I discussed, is the fact that the template should be in urgent care centers and non-New York City trauma centers, so that folks that are brought with more minor injuries are also captured using this template. It's not difficult also to consider this template used by pre-hospital providers. So this could be something that's in the tablets that they're carrying when they're doing their EPCRs, which is their ambulance call reporting. And Rob, as far as the NYPD.
Yeah, on the police side, yeah, we've been working with the police for the last couple of years to kind of bring this up to speed. And earlier this year, they did adopt a uniform reporting system for e-mobility on both their fatalities and their crash reports, their general crash reports. It's not as granular as what you're doing, Erik, because it's just the limitations of what a police officer is going to be able to do and detect out there for these crashes. But they are basically categorizing things as either a bike or an e-bike, right? And that is in the bike category. And then there's a other motorized category, and is differentiating between stand-up scooters and then mopeds, basically electric, some kind of electric sit-down device that's either and can be electric, and differentiates between the types that have that are legal and non-legal. And I believe that's about the breadth of it. So it's much more basic, but we will have that. That's in the data, and it's moving forward. Right. Other questions from the floor? And is everyone else just still seeing the focus only on Erik Marketan?
No, I see the 5 of you.
Okay, it's moving around as people speak. Okay, very good. This was something weird on my end. All right, so other questions? Did Arthur come back? Is he still there? See if he would answer that Prospect Park West question. I mean, Jessica, I'll throw something out to you. If you could, maybe you could just go a little more in depth about it was, you were talking about visitors and tourists to DC, and the different profile that look like between in terms of the two modes compared to the residents, and that was really interesting to me. I wonder if you could just go a little more in depth about that, like any behavioral theories around that or anything.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the brand new riders also skewed obviously towards the tourists, which makes sense because they probably had less opportunity to be able to use an e-scooter at home. But the hospital that we were working with is kind of close to the National Mall in DC, where there's kind of, it's like surrounded by sidewalk. And so a lot of the injuries did happen kind of in that general area. Another interesting thing with looking at the tourists versus the local residents is that, especially with the tourists, they tended to be in that central business district and were still riding on the sidewalk, even though it was prohibited. People don't have a way of knowing these things, and especially if you have out of town people, they're really going to have no way of knowing. So if you're just putting a rule out there without a way of enforcing it, or having it be self-enforced on the scooters, that's where you'll have maybe more of the problem. But yeah, I don't know if that kind of split would be the same in the rest of the city. And it certainly had some seasonality to it with, like DC has a big cherry blossom festival that was kind of like right close to when we kicked off the study. And that's when we really saw a lot of some of these out of town riders. But I think, it really is a question of if there's something that we want to do in advance of telling people how to use these, how do we reach these people who are coming in and kind of, just getting on these for the first time. And that's, I don't think something we really have a good answer to.
Another thing I was struck by too is just when you quoted the actual, the amount of scooters per person, it's like 10,000? Right, and that's like similar to scale to New York City's like city bike program, in a city of 8.5 million versus 500,000, right? So I just wonder, what kind of if that's created issues like on the street, pushback, just a density of traffic on the street and sidewalk.
Yeah, I mean, and it definitely took a long time to scale up to that point, and DC did it very incrementally and started out with a pilot program like most places do. And, basically operators could apply for more vehicles for good behavior. I think at this point that we have the same kinds of people complaining about scooters that you see everywhere. But I think as the fleet has increased, the complaints haven't seemed to increase the same amount. I think people might get used to seeing them. I think that DC has also made some efforts to try to make sure that they're more distributed around the city and making sure that operators are putting them in all kinds of places, which is more of an equity issue to make sure everyone has access to them, but also probably makes it so people aren't seeing them all concentrated in one place. And I think the speed cap might also have something to do with how well they're accepted, at least by people on the sidewalk. We might see more sidewalk ridings in other places, but they're not whipping by as fast. And when I visit other cities, I'm always so surprised at how fast the scooters are going because I'm just so used to them being as slow as they are here.
10 is very slow.
It is very slow, and it creates, it does create issues with, no matter how fast the scooters are going, there's always going to be speed differential issues. But I do wonder what our bike lane use is like compared with other places, because they are going even slower than bikes than what you might see elsewhere. So, there's positive and negative things to having different speeds.
I think we have a question from Jenna Miller. Oh, you're on mute.
Press the button, but it didn't work. Thanks. Hi, everyone. I'm Jenna from the Public Design Commission. I just have a quick question about kind of with the increase in non-bicycle micromobility use that we've been seeing. So with like the e-bikes and e-scooters and everything, is there any evidence that creating separate e-bike or e-scooter lanes could actually help to reduce injuries and conflicts? And is that something that DOT has been looking into? Thanks.
Well, I mean, it's something that has been discussed, but I think that just from a really just an operational feasibility perspective, it would be, extremely difficult to implement because just because of the amount of street space that's available. Um, I could see it, maybe it could get piloted somewhere, but I think the potential for that um, would be very, very limited. But maybe, but there's actually a lot of cities across the country that are overbuilt in terms of road capacity, and I could see experimentation with that. A place like Buffalo or Salt Lake City, somewhere with very, very wide roads and relatively less traffic per foot or per lane or whatever you want to quantify it as.
Jessica, this is Eric. I have a question respective to the individuals that were injured on e-scooters. Did they tend to abandon the platform of using them after injured? Was there any way to determine that like there were significant numbers of those casual tourists that sort of were injured and then dropped memberships or never rode again? And also my second question is about riders not being the renter. Like, is there any way to measure sort of the casual, I rent it and I just pass it off to my younger cousin or individual that might not be the best person to be riding it?
And those are both good questions that I don't really have a good answer to. We didn't follow up with people after they were in the ED, and so we don't know, if the people who were injured for the first time, what happened to them going forward. Yeah, and I don't really know about the second question either. I mean, DC, like elsewhere, actually, I don't know what their official, age limits are on renting the scooters. I think there probably are some. We certainly see a lot of teenagers riding them. We didn't look at them in this study, but I'm not sure, how they're getting access to them. If it's, if they're lying about their age or someone else is renting them and giving them to them, or if those rules just aren't there.